Hello, yes. Welcome back. Remember Space Cadet? You almost certainly do, because that game was on, like, every copy of Windows up until, 10 years ago or something. You almost definitely played Space Cadet. And if you did, more likely than not, your experience with the game was that you open it up and you basically fucked around for a little bit, hitting the ball, watching it whack different bumpers and shit, and you got some points and went, cool, that's Space Cadet, that's Pinball. But the thing is that if you scratch just a little bit deeper, you would discover that Space Cadet had more going on with it than you might have expected. And what I mean by that is that Space Cadet had content, like video game content, like a main campaign. You could complete missions in the game, and they required you to do specific tasks. And if you completed them, you made progress. You had like a Space Cadet rank, like a military rank. And if you got to the very last mission, there was basically like a final boss mission where you had to complete a bunch of mini versions of previous missions that you had completed before. The fact that this stuff exists, but almost nobody is familiar with it, is kind of interesting, because pinball, sure, in itself is cool, but when you have objectives, when you have progression, that's kind of compelling. And as it turns out, almost all pinball tables, especially modern ones that come out these days, have content like this like crazy. They have all kinds of mechanics. They have quests, they have RPG progression, they have currency. Pinball tables are extremely elaborate in the types of content that they offer outside of just what you see on the surface. And the reason why very few people ever come to realize this about pinball is really for one reason. And that's because pinball is incredibly chaotic. When I say that pinball is chaotic, I mean that in a kind of scientific way, which is that for any given state of a pinball table, it is very, very difficult to predict what the actual outcome of that state will be, how things will change if you just move forward a couple seconds. And this more or less lines up with definitions of chaos that you'll see in scientific fields like physics. Two states can look very similar, but have very different outcomes if they're not perfectly similar, because there's just so many variables and so many branching possibilities that the possibility space gets incredibly complex incredibly quickly and becomes basically impossible to navigate, especially if you're a person who's playing pinball and only has a fraction of a second to make an evaluation of what's going to happen and what should I do here. And this aspect of pinball, this chaos, conflicts with the content of pinball, this underlying game that supposedly hides beneath the surface. Because if you want to do anything in pinball with intention, well, it's going to be hard. And in a lot of cases, it might even feel random if you're playing pinball for the first time. This is really different from our experiences with a lot of traditional video games or just games in general. In Mario, you press right and go right to get started with the level. There's a button for that. In pinball, if you want to start a quest and it requires you to go to a certain place on the table, there's no button for that. There's not even buttons for directions or anything. You get two flippers, maybe another one, and a metal ball. And it's up to you to figure out how to get started. This obfuscation of your ability to move intentionally makes it so that when a person plays pinball for the first time, they're almost never going to grace that content. Maybe accidentally, but when things happen in a way that feels random, that feels like you don't know why it happened, it's not really content at the end of the day, is it? So what's the point then? If pinball's so chaotic, nobody knows what's going on. Well, chaos theory dictates, not to get super pretentious and stuff, that there are going to be underlying patterns and phenomena even in chaotic situations, because at the end of the day, chaos is not randomness. It can exist in deterministic systems where the same set of variables always results in the same outcomes. And that's the thing that's actually cool about pinball. In the 1960s, pinball was illegal. At least it was in New York. And the reasoning behind this was that pinball was seen as a form of gambling. It was this random, unpredictable machine that was targeting children because it presented itself as a game. And there's a pretty famous story from the world of pinball about how pinball eventually came to be legal again in the US. The story basically goes, there was some court hearing or something, and this pinball enthusiast showed up into the court with a pinball table and made certain calls and demonstrated that he could predict what was going to happen and actually have those things happen. He showed that pinball was a game of skill, not luck. Now, I know that conflicts with what I just said, but the fact of the matter is that most people, when they play pinball, even extremely skilled players, don't have a game where everything always goes their way. More often than not, something goes wrong, something is unpredictable, and you have to respond to that. The guy who got pinball legalized maybe got a little bit lucky, you could say. But this finding order out of chaos, this ability to develop skills, is what makes pinball so beautiful, especially to me. Because when you're in this situation where there is constant chaos and you are constantly being confronted with uncertainty, how you choose to respond to that situation is, in reality, the game of pinball. All this other content, these missions, quests, whatever, really, they're just a way to get to that conflict. They're the ends to the means. And I know what I'm saying, really, is that the true pinball was the friends we made along the way, but it's true. That's why pinball is interesting. Because how you respond to chaos is going to be different for everyone. There's no objective answer because of that complexity. And so every decision you make has values and a philosophy behind it that is self-expressive of who you are and how you are responding to this confusion, disorder, whatever, how you try and gain control. And you might think, oh, well, maybe there is a right way to play pinball, though. Maybe top players do all play the same. But that's not the case. Different players choose different strategies. They develop different skill sets for different aspects of the game of pinball to respond to that chaos, to try and find control. It's really whatever feels right to you. And the interesting thing about pinball for me, or the thing that really draws me in, gets me super engaged, is that when the normal state of something is chaos, and you try something that feels like to you might get you somewhere, might get you the order that you seek, and it works out, maybe it works out and continues to work out for 30 more seconds, maybe for a minute, that period of when things are going your way feels fucking amazing. Feels incredible. Because things working, things being predictable is not what pinball usually is. And to get that outcome because of you, because of your approach to the game, is incredibly gratifying. Pinball is about finding order out of chaos. That's the game. In general, I find chaos to be a kind of recurring theme in a lot of games. Not all of them. Some of them you have a ton of control, but especially in a lot of competitive multiplayer games where space is not discrete. If it's not finite, there's effectively infinite possibilities. Chaos comes up time and time again, and how you respond to those types of chaos often is some part of what makes those games interesting. The thing that I find really fascinating about pinball is the fact that it's a game that leans heavily into this chaotic element. It is so important that I think it is fundamentally what pinball is all about. Chaos. Maybe other people don't agree with me on that, but that's just how I feel. And I just think that is such an awesome and unique experience. If you've never played pinball before and you love games, video games, whatever, you should try playing pinball, and you should try seeing what it feels to just be in this hectic space, not knowing what's going on. And as you continue to play, it will take a while. You won't get this on your first or even second or third try, maybe. But over time, realizing that you can find control, but in a way that still has you accept the fact that at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen. And just in general, I think we live in a pretty chaotic world where you don't know what's going on. So it's a little cool how it applies that way too. That's all. I don't know. I don't think I have any more thoughts there. Thanks for watching. It's a multi-parter. Maybe I'll do more of these. Maybe I won't. It's a little bit more work. Anyways, bye.